so excited for today's guest, Dr. Eric Anthony Johnson, CEO of Aeon. We're going to talk a little bit about the organization and very excited to have you here with me today on Spectrum of Topics.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So maybe share with our listeners a little bit of your background and kind of journey to the organization.
Yep. So by way of background, my background is so broad, but let me just say I have a PhD, I have two master's degrees. I'm a graduate of Harvard Graduate School of Design, where I have an AMDP. My background is in real estate, community development, public policy, nonprofits. We have a very broad background, but I tell you why it's important, because the challenges we face today, you just have to have a background where you can pivot on a dime. So before coming to Aeon, I was actually in Dallas, Texas, where I was the chief of real estate, housing, economic development, historic preservation planning for the city of Dallas. Previously, I was the community development director in Bloomington,
Okay.
where I wrote the city's housing ordinance, did some great work in Bloomington, and had the opportunity to come back to the Twin Cities to lead Aeon as its CEO.
Yeah. How long have you been CEO of Aeon?
Let's see, it's 2 years and 6 months now.
Okay. That's great. That's awesome. So maybe for our listeners and those that don't know, I think a lot of people do, right? But just for maybe those that are watching and kind of all over across the country, maybe share a little bit about Aeon's organization.
Yep, so Aeon's been around for right under 40 years, and we own, operate about 6,000 housing units in the
Wow.
Twin Cities. We serve about 17,300 residents to be exact. We do everything from low-income housing tax credits, naturally occurring affordable housing, which is, older properties built in the 1960s. We tend to buy those, preserve those. So our housing will include a combination of housing for those formerly homeless. We will do incomes ranging from as low as 30 to about 80% of area median income. And we're basically all over the Twin Cities, from Minneapolis, St. Paul, Edina,
Yep.
Bloomington. So we're pretty much spread pretty wide across the Twin Cities.
Oh, that's fantastic. Actually, you and I got introduced through one of the board of directors, Matt Fleck, who's with Great Southern Bank. He introduced us and I attended, I had the brochure, I loved it.
Oh
Your
yeah, yep.
bricks and mortar event that you had. It was very moving to say the least. You had a resident there that spoke just about the impact of your organization and what that has. And so that was that was really my kind of first introduction to it, and just felt very moved to donate to kind of your organization and what you guys are really doing.
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe tell a little bit of, I just had mentioned kind of the Beyond Bricks and Mortars event where you and I met. Maybe tell our listeners more about that event. And I loved what you said there, right? You said, and part of your discussion, you talked about your passion for the organization, which really people will get through our conversation. But you said this one line, you said, I'm a truth teller and willing to discuss kind of the current landscape within affordable housing. So maybe share with our listeners some of those challenges that you guys are facing right now.
Yeah, so let me quickly just, Beyond Bricks and Mortar is an annual fundraiser.
Yeah.
We usually have somewhere between, I don't know, 400 plus guests attending the fundraiser.
Mm-hmm.
It's an opportunity to, one, get introduced to Aeon, two, be able to tell our sort of story in terms of what we do and try to bring in new supporters and advocates for affordable housing in particular. And at the event, in terms of being a truth teller, affordable housing is already tough, but it's actually getting tougher, if that's a word. And I say that because imagine trying to operate properties when you're faced with having to cover security costs in particular, because the challenges with the numbers of police officers in the city of Minneapolis and beyond. Number two, dealing with issues of inflation, just sheer insurance costs, rising material costs, unit turnover costs, when you turn a unit to get it prepared to rent, all of your costs associated with that. Add in the mental illness that we're dealing within the communities, and the issue of fentanyl and this sort of drug issue is really making this a very tough sort of environment to work in. That,
Mm-hmm.
that is superimposed on a system that is heavily supported by tax credit projects, and you don't really see much creativity there. And it's just putting pressure on organizations like Aeon, because it's hard to even create a operating pro forma to understand how you really plan for managing your properties. And then
Yeah.
lastly, the eviction moratorium that came out of the pandemic really started changing the landscape in terms of how people pay rent. So, eviction moratorium, in some cases, we would go 6, 8, 9 months before we can actually evict someone because they're not paying rent. We're not big supporters of eviction, but at the end of the day, we have to pay a mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like a snapshot of some of those challenges.
That's quite a bit.
Yep, it's quite a bit.
Yeah, that's yeah, really quite a bit. So you kind of mentioned a little bit about a need for kind of creative thinking and courage to do things a little bit differently. Can you share with our listeners how you and your organization, you ran through all those challenges. How are you guys kind of looking at that and maybe leveraging some of your leadership and creative thinking that you have to kind of set your organization up to kind of be able to better handle those?
Yeah, so think about it this way. I use the word change and disruption, which is, to me, based on everything I see, read, study, we're sort of in this new age of change and disruption. It's going to be constant. Those items I described is actually part of that. So at Aeon, we are doing everything to review our systems, processes, how we are operating our properties, going back from the ground up to think about how we build to be more of an agile organization capable of change, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we think about acquiring properties or doing developments. We're now taking into consideration some of these forces and factors that press upon our work that will make it tough to do. So how do we look at all of these different things as we are continuing to try and do our mission? So it's really about just resetting the organization, retooling so we can be more agile in terms of what we do. Example, naturally occurring affordable housing, which that's where the bulk of Americans live in terms of affordability. But
Yeah.
the weakness there is no source for capital improvements. So we're trying to think about how we create a strategy to develop a new source outside of the traditional system to develop funding to support not just acquisitions, but all of the capital improvements that will come with these older properties.
Okay. Are you able to share or expand on that a little bit, like additional sources or?
Yeah, so think about it this way. If your properties are already running on tight margins, the ability to take on more debt is not the solution.
Yep.
We need a grant-based source that you can have access to that does not put financial pressures on your development. So
Mhm.
we're looking at a way of creating a grant-based source that we can connect to our NOAA properties to help deal with some of the capital improvement issues. It's
Yep.
going to be pilot because there is no source around the country that actually is doing this. So for Aeon, it would be an innovative approach that does not exist anywhere in the country in terms of the system. We hope to be the first to try and put something.
Wow. That's incredible. That's incredible. That's a testament to you talked about too in that at that event and that again my first introduction to Aeon about the employees really being in kind of an important factor to doing that and you all kind of seem to have this creative mindset and moving kind of in that positive direction to kind of be able to respond to that.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Because I think at the event I mentioned, like residents, I'm sorry, not residents, but staff having to put out a fire with a small bucket of water.
Mm-hmm.
That's representative of the capital improvement needs that come with these older, aging NOAA properties. So logic says if we want our residents and staff to be in situations where one staff, will have the tools necessary to do the job, and the residents feeling good about living in the developments, to me, it's a no-brainer try and figure out a source that can deal with those issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You had mentioned Aeon's been around for almost 40 years. You kind of, you and remind me again, the woman from, I think it's Neighborhood of America. Is it Neighborhoods of
Susan Eiffel.
Susan? Yeah. So she had mentioned about this. It was kind of a light bulb moment for me. It was just kind of an interesting take that I had never really thought of, right? And it was about the importance of viewing and like assessing a nonprofit organization, much like you would a for-profit business. And kind of what does that mean, right? So you talked a little bit about some of those challenges, how you guys are setting up some of these kind of creative thinkings to help kind of fund your capital projects, but maybe kind of dive into the strategy and the foundation that you guys are doing as an organization, really, to kind of set you guys up for success.
Yeah, so when Susan talked about the nonprofit more like in the business sense, I think she's really also referring to the mentality and the philosophy. Just because you are a nonprofit doesn't mean you can't think and be agile like a business.
Mhm.
So that takes us to a space where our chief real estate officer, when I talk about rebuilding the blocks, it's going down to the baseline of operations and rebuilding basically everything, right? It's how we look at partnership projects versus having to go at this thing really solo. How do we look at policies that we can work to address to better help the system? So when she's talking about that, making a stronger business case, for example, you can take and make an argument that affordable housing is really important to your local GDP, right? How do you talk about the importance of who's living in your developments that bring economic value, not just to your development, but to the community at large? So in other words, there's this sort of mentality in the nonprofit world that you feel like you have to beg and plead for support. What we're saying is we're going to make a business case for everything that we do.
Uh-huh.
Using that logic as we think about funding, as we think about strategies, as we talk about lessons learned, as part of all of this work we've been going through over the last several years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really like, well, yeah, why wouldn't you assess kind of looking at a nonprofit organization like that? And it's fantastic to see. I think you guys will probably see a lot of positive outcomes from all of the work and the hard work that you, your staff, and your organization are doing to kind of set you guys up for success.
Yeah, and you know what? That's important because the last several years, when I tell you it's been chaos, it's been chaos. If some of my peer organizations here in
Yeah.
the Twin Cities or around the country were on this call today, they would say the exact same thing. What we're trying to say is change is happening fast. We better get with the program and change as well. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In your discussions around Minneapolis and the nation, you had mentioned kind of in our pre-discussion, and there's some misconception, right? When you hear the words affordable housing, maybe share with us, maybe kind of talk to us a little bit about that, right? Like what you guys have heard. But then I think it's important to share with our viewers, like what is something that I could do? What's something that our viewers can do to kind of help change that narrative and be part of kind of the solution?
Yeah, that is a great question. So the narrative of affordable housing, let me put it this way. Most people, when they think of affordable housing, they get this imagery in their mind. Low income people moving into my neighborhood to reduce my property values. There's this imagery that goes back to probably the 1950s. When you think about old housing projects in cities like Chicago and these different places. So we get low income housing confused with affordable housing. It's very simple. No American should spend no more than 30% of their income on housing costs. If you are spending more than 30% of the income on housing costs, you're actually in that category of affordable housing. But we don't talk about it. The narrative has to shift from um, talking more about what you are spending in terms of your cost and occupations.
Mm-hmm.
People would be school teacher, a nurse, individuals working at restaurants, hotels, just regular people is sort of like what we're talking about. Just like
Mhm.
a recent college graduate, anybody spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. That's really what affordable housing is, but we don't talk about it that way. And if there's a shift needed, it's going to have to talk more about just that aspect of it, because across the country, it doesn't matter. Minneapolis, Texas, California, Washington, New York, on and on, it's a problem. And in order for that narrative to change, we're going to start talking about occupations. What people are making does not match what housing costs are. And if you put it in the context of 30% of your income, you
Yeah.
should spend any more than that. So take your calculator out, see how much you're making.
Yeah.
That is what you should spend on housing costs. If you pay more than that, you're in the category of affordable housing.
Yeah. So is there anything we could do? I mean, to help just, would it be correcting? Would it be, like, is there anything we could be doing or I could be doing that we could be?
Yeah, I think just starting to talk about it more that way,
Yeah.
because that's the standard. I'm
Yep.
not making stuff up. That's the standard, and we need to start saying that. I'll give you a great example. I was in Starbucks getting my coffee. The young lady comes up. She's talking to me. Hey, what do you do for a living? Oh, I work for Aeon. We do affordable housing, everything. And she immediately said, "Oh, wow, those people need affordable housing." I said, "Wow, so what do you do for a living?" She said, "Oh, I'm a school teacher." I
Yep.
said, "Or you like you married? You got your husband, or you got roommates?" She said, "No, it's just me." And I was like, "You are who we're talking about. I know what teachers make."
Yeah.
You do the numbers on that, you fall into that category. And she was like, "Oh my goodness, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Were you talking about me?" I'm like, "Yes, we're talking about you." So
Yeah.
talking more about it in terms of like occupations and
Okay.
30% income. Whether you're
Yeah.
an elderly person, think about an elderly person retiring, and we know there's not massive pensions anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
you trying to calculate your retirement, and you have to pay for an apartment or, God forbid, a mortgage, and you're spending more than 30% of your retirement money. I mean, that's almost impossible. So I
Yeah.
think the discussion has to move in that context,
Yep.
right?
She, from your conversation and talking to her about that, it seemed like, I mean, did she kind of resonate with her? It's like, oh wow.
Well,
Like,
like the light bulb went off, and
mm-hmm.
I never thought about it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Response was, I'm always thinking about, homeless people off the streets or whatever. And she never thought about it like that. She was like, wow,
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So all of the work I've done in housing, affordable housing in particular, I tend to lead with that. I lead with occupations, and I say to city councils, I say to leaders, I say to communities, whether it's speaking in churches or whatever, think about 30% of your income. And then you start to get an idea. When you do it, you'll be surprised how much you're spending. Then you
Yeah.
say, wait a minute, that's me I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
the only way we're going to be able to really get at this thing is start to change the narrative, because
Mm-hmm.
change the narrative beyond this negative imagery to the regular person,
Mm-hmm.
we get more support, in particular from local communities, to support more housing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great approach because it was very eye-opening for me to hear that too, like just in general, right? Like go lead with occupation, all that. That's a good tip. That's a really good tip. So, what's kind of an upcoming event? So I know you guys probably have a ton, right, that you guys are doing, but what's something that if a listener is interested in learning a little bit more about your organization or wants to attend an event or maybe potentially donate to your cause, what's some ways that they can get involved?
In the fall, we have what's called Chats from Home. It's sort of a virtual event where you can sign up, and on the Chats from Home is where I'm going to be talking about not just Aeon, but some of the affordable housing challenges, what we
Uh-huh.
that's happening now in the industry, some of the challenges, how we're thinking about addressing the challenges, and just open up the conversation for callers to discuss with me any and all questions they have related to housing. So that'll be in the fall. I want to say October, November-ish. Uh,
Okay.
get past the summer into the fall. So that will be our sort of next sort of open discussion.
Okay. That's fantastic. Oh, that's awesome.
Something else
Any, oh,
I'm sorry.
sorry.
Yeah, something else we would do. We will bring in renowned national speakers and invite the community to come and listen to some of these national speakers in terms of what's happening in the housing industry. So we'll post things on social media, website, talking about these upcoming events.
Okay, can you get on like, I'm assuming you could get on like a mailer list?
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
Oh, that's fantastic. I definitely want to um get on that list and hopefully be able to attend the next event that you guys have with some of those national speakers and just kind of addressing and discussing some of the challenges that you guys are facing. Yeah. Anything else that you wanted to chat about?
Well,
Any
no,
closing thoughts?
well, just closing thoughts to our listeners. You know, we're sort of in this time of change, and it's not a secret to anyone. It's just at the community level, it doesn't matter. You know, state, local, federal, we're just in this weird sort of time. And the greater leadership we can have as we deal with these issues is going to be important. One of the main issues that is just really just tearing the country apart is the ability to afford a home. And that is something that I'm just saying to everybody, we have to pay close attention to. You know, college graduates can't afford to live unless they've got 4 or 5 people living in one apartment trying to share rent. But my main message is this is just a time of change and disruption. And it's just incumbent upon us to start thinking outside of the box. If we don't, I don't know what the situation is going to be. That's
Mhm.
what
Yeah, I think we should end on that. Mic drop. I don't think that there's anything else we could add to that.
yep.
No, I so appreciate you taking the time. Again, I was so moved by my kind of first introduction to Aeon organization by attending that Beyond Bricks and Mortars. So for those listeners that don't know about it, haven't gone, please go. It was amazing, eye-opening. Got to hear from residents, just the impact truly that your organization has in our community is incredible. So I'll help kind of taking that tip, right? Changing the narrative around the like the misconception of affordable housing in that. I thought that was a great tip to leave with. But yeah, I appreciate you taking the time.
All right. This was great. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Talk soon.